Hello, thanks for stopping by Mr. Fide's channel. This is Mr. Fide. My original intention was not to come back and revisit Chapter 1. However, after I posted my first installment, I wanted to come back and emphasize the fact that cults do not need to be religious. A cult could even be formed around atheism or skepticism. I do not mean to imply that all atheists and skeptics are members of cults. I just want to remind everyone that just because something claims to be a religion does not automatically make it a cult. Likewise, just because something teaches no religious ideas does not mean it is not a cult. A cult, at least in the forming years, will use manipulation and deception to influence its members. For example, my Google News alerts for all news involving Scientology informed me of a story today, July 19, 2008, that an award of appreciation was bestowed on the Church of Scientology for their efforts in the 9/11 terrorist attack. If this story is true, or claims of having people masquerading as firemen giving awards and testimony, it would be a perfect example of one type of emotional manipulation used by cults. Cults have more to do with interactions than they do with subject matter. I would also like to note, in Part 1 in this chapter, I mistakenly use the word normal instead of abnormal in one of my first few sentences of the first video. So here is Part 2 of Chapter 1 of Margaret Singer's Cults in Our Midst. Part 2 of Defining Cults. Who joins cults? When we hear of cults, scams, and individuals being controlled and influenced by others, we instinctively try to separate ourselves from those persons. It seems a point of valor and self-esteem to insist no one could get me to do such things when hearing about situations of intense influence. The not me myth. People like to think that their opinions, values, and ideas are totally self-regulated. Even though we all know human minds are open to influence, most of us proclaim only crazy, stupid people need to join cults. People also cherish a fantasy that manipulators confront, browbeat, and argue people into doing their bidding. It has become clear over the years that everyone is susceptible to the lure of these manipulators. In fact, the majority of adolescents and adults in cults come from middle-class backgrounds and are fairly well educated and are not seriously disturbed prior to joining. Research indicates that approximately 2/3 of those who have joined cults came from normal, functioning families. Another stress factor evolves when a person feels overwhelmed by the sheer number of choices he or she needs to make. Many are attempting to come to grips with their overall values, beliefs, and purposes. Many former cult members report that certain classes they took late in high school and early in college contributed greatly to their bewilderment. When the personal outlooks and the worldviews of the instructors seemed overwhelmingly pessimistic and demoralizing. Many adults today are overwhelmed by the confusion and the apparent coldness of our society. Violence, homelessness, the lack of meaning, the widespread loss of respect for authority figures, the loss of family communication, the lessening role of established religions, the failing sense of community or even neighborhood. In one form or another, each cult purports to offer an improved state of mind, an expanded state of being, and a moral, spiritual, or political state of righteous certainty. That supposedly beneficial state can be reached only by following the narrowly prescribed pathways of a particular group, master, guru, or trainer to grasp the approach to life. The new recruit must surrender his or her critical mind, must yield to the flow of force, must have childlike trust and faith. The special methods used to manipulate recruits into such an accepting state of mind will be explored in detail later. Why do they join? Those who have studied the modern-day cults have found that it is not only one type of person who gets enmeshed into cults, but rather a person who has a combination of factors occurring nearly simultaneously. Singer has found that two conditions make an individual especially vulnerable to cult recruiting: being depressed and being in between important affiliations. Vulnerable individuals may be lonely in a transition between high school and college, between college and a job and graduate school, traveling away from home, arriving at a new location, recently jilted or divorced, fresh from losing a job, feeling overwhelmed about how things have been going, or not knowing what to do next in life. Unsettling personal occurrences are commonplace. A high school senior is rejected by a college of her choice. A man's mother dies. A woman decides to sell her condo and travel after an unhappy ending to a long-term relationship. At such times, we are more open to persuasion, more suggestible. We are willing to take something offered to us without thinking that there might be strings attached. Some people will respond to printed notices on kiosks and bulletin boards. Others to media ads offering lectures and group meetings. Besides tapping the responses to these luring but deceptive ads, cults also use one-on-one recruiting techniques. In most cases, the actual recruitment grows out of such one-on-one contact between a cult recruiter and a vulnerable person. One cult member was directed to get a job in the registrar's office at a nearby university to target anyone who came to drop out of classes. Each cult has its own lures and tactics for getting new members and recruiting its type of person. Courses used to lure people into cults have a wide range: how to communicate, how to scientifically reduce stress in your life, how to manage your office and become a millionaire, how to get in control of your life, how to become a martial arts teacher, how to live forever, how to detect if you have been abducted by space creatures and join with others who have had the same experience, how to reach perfect enlightenment and govern the world, how to live past lives, and so on. The courses are as varied as the gimmicks around which cults are formed. 2 Russian students who had been brought to the United States by a cultic group under false pretenses had been promised a full scholarship to a U.S. university. Instead, once they got here, they were put in tourist areas to recruit new members. Myth of the Seeker. Another myth surrounding those who join cults is that people go out looking for cults. Cult apologists capitalize on this notion and claim people seek out the very group they end up in. As we have seen, a cult can be defined in many ways, but for our purposes, and to explain most modern-day cults, it is necessary to think of a process, not an event, and to view life in a cult as a process. Processes involve and unfold. Something goes on between people. There is an interaction and a transaction, and a relationship established.